You're listening to The Art of Aging, a podcast where we talk about growing older with courage, connection, and compassion. I'm your host, Sherry Gibson-Walters, founder of Harmony Caregiving and certified professional consultant on aging. Whether you're supporting a loved one or learning to care for yourself in new ways, we're here to walk with you every step of the way. Today, we're diving into something that affects millions of Canadians, yet remains hidden in plain sight: caregiver burnout, compassion fatigue, and the vital role of self-care and collective care. Joining me today is a familiar voice you've heard in previous episodes, Saskia Brumwell-Blessing. We have been through quite the journey together at Harmony Caregiving, supporting families through periods of burnout and working to prevent it. Saskia is now graduating as a social worker, and we're excited to tap into her knowledge on this topic. Welcome back to the podcast, Saskia.
Thank you so much, Sherry. It's always so nice to be here and discuss these important topics with you. We've had so many deep conversations about caregiving over the years, and with all the joy and the fulfillment that caregiving can bring, I think something that's often not talked about and something that goes unacknowledged is the challenges that come with caregiving as well. And we'll talk about those today. I think burnout is different for everyone. And before we can address it, we need to kind of talk about all the different ways that it can show up and some of the different challenges that can come with it. And one of those challenges is compassion fatigue. And that term essentially it just means that it's what happens when empathy becomes overwhelming and you've been so present with someone else's pain that it starts to feel like your own. You might still be doing the tasks, but inside you're starting to feel emotionally numb or even resentful towards, the person that you're caring for, or just resentful in general. And when that emotional exhaustion goes unchecked, it often doesn't just harm the caregiver, it can also put the care recipient at risk. Sadly, studies show that burnout and compassion fatigue are linked to a higher likelihood of neglect or unintentional harm. And that's not because caregivers don't care or because they don't love the person that they're caring for, but it's because they're overwhelmed and they're unsupported and they're stretched way far beyond their limits.
Yep. I agree with that, stretched far beyond their limits, right? And that makes so much sense to me. Uh, and that's actually what's often overlooked is how easily that leads to a total disconnect, not just from your loved one, but also from yourself, like as a caregiver. So I always think of a young woman that we worked with who was in her 30s caring for her grandmother who was living with dementia. And at first she was helping with errands and medication reminders. And soon it actually turned into like bathing and cooking and managing finances on top of her full-time job. So she ended up moving in with her grandmother and taking compassionate care leave from her work. So to take care of her grandmother. She loved spending time with her grandmother, and she always said that she didn't see it as burden, but despite her love and compassion, the reality was that it was really isolating for her, being the sole person responsible for her grandmother's needs. She also feared if she took too much time off work, the harder it would be for her to actually return to the workforce and return to her career at some point, when her grandmother was better or passed away. So she felt her own goals and passions were slipping away, and she knew that it wasn't sustainable, but she couldn't see any other option. She expressed it as a feeling of failure for not being able to manage everything on her own. And there we go again with the failure. But she wasn't a failure. She was burnt out.
Yeah, and that's why I think recognizing those early signs matters so much. When you start to feel like your sense of self and your own identity is kind of shrinking, and you're constantly waiting for the next, shoe to drop. You're bracing for the next emergency, or even just the next task on the list because there's always so many. When those things are happening, it's time to take a step back and ask yourself, am I experiencing burnout? Could something more be going on here? Could this be impacting me in some negative ways?
And that's why I think organizations like Caregivers Alberta are so fantastic. And the fact that we are doing this podcast to shine more of a light on caregiver burnout and, that it is actually a real thing is very important. So I would say to people, like, if any of this that Saskia and I are speaking about today is resonating and you're thinking, that sounds like me, don't worry. Let's walk through some real simple steps that you can start with today Let's start with prevention, right? Preventing burnout is, it's not about, well, preventing burnout is about having a sustainable system. It's not sacrificing oneself. It's built through, Saskia, it's built through the support systems like family, friends, professionals who can help share that load. And then also permission to rest, to say no, so set boundaries, right? And to ask for help. And there's also tapping into resources. So education, coaching, financial assistance, and there are community programs available to people as well. And an importance for reconnection with like one's own identity. So what did they enjoy doing for themselves, right? Hobbies and basically like the needs that they have. Some people love to be out in nature and some people don't, right? But it's individualized and it needs to be outside of the caregiving. So when caregivers are supported and empowered, I feel that the care that they give actually becomes more sustainable and more
Mhm.
joyful.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I love that you say more joyful too, because there's a joy that comes with caregiving that we mentioned early on today, and
Mhm.
it can be easy to forget when that burnout creeps in. So let's work together to remind everyone of the joy that can come with it. And
Yeah.
part of that is, what we're saying is going beyond the self-care to bring that joy back. You can't just have a bubble bath and light a candle, which is what self-care is often advertised as. But what's really needed is collective care. And what collective care asks is how can we hold each other up? Not just how do I take care of myself? What can I do to make myself feel better? But when we distribute that care, we also distribute the risk. And that's how we prevent the breakdown and the burnout.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Collective care is such a powerful shift in how we look at taking care of ourselves because I actually think it shouldn't be like the responsibility of one person. It's something that we really must all help each other with for sure. So now that we've talked about prevention, what about for those of you who are feeling that sense of burnout already? Is it too late, Saskia? Or is it not too late?
No, no, it's not too late, and I don't think it's ever too late. As much as we've shared some stories where there was challenges, at the end of the day, you can still find that support at any stage, at any step of the process. So, let's go through a few of the steps to address burnout if that's something you're already feeling. And so, step one is really to recognize the signs. That's It might seem like an easy step, but it actually can be really difficult to just sit back and say, hey, these are the things that are showing up. So, if you're exhausted, irritable, feeling checked out of the situation, checked out of your loved one's life, maybe you're feeling emotionally numb, those are some of the cues that can kind of cue you into the fact that this might be happening. There might be some burnout happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so important to recognize it. And I think you're right too. It can take people a really long time. So being able to talk about what those cues are is important.
Mhm.
And just naming it, right? I think I'm feeling burnt out. I think I'm feeling burnt out, right? And so that moment that you realize something's not right is the first act of self-care. And then step two would be to build your support team. So let's think back to the young woman that I talked about in her 30s caring for her grandparents. What helped her wasn't a spa day. It was actually connecting with those around her to ask for help. And when her aunt stepped in once a week, she was reminded that she didn't have to do it alone and that asking for help was okay. And once she had the time to herself, it just took a few hours a week, I think. And she was able to think about what other support she could access. And then she contacted us for help. So ultimately, freeing up more of her time and allowing her to continue her work and knowing that her grandmother was well supported.
Yeah, so it sounds like she was really able to tap into the collective care
Yeah.
system that we talked about and create a system of support around her and her grandmother, right? It wasn't just one or the other. They both gained more support from that. And, they weren't doing it alone anymore, which kind
Mhm.
of brings us to step three, which is now you have you've got some support, got that collective care, and now it's time to take care of yourself. So it's time to schedule that self-care. I know that might sound silly, but scheduling it is really important because it's not something that needs to happen in the future. It's something that needs to happen this week, today, right now. And
Mhm.
you don't have to do it alone. And I know we've said that a lot this episode, but really, like, let someone join you in it. Bring someone into this process. Self care isn't isolation. It can be
Mhm.
done in community, and it's best done in community. In my schooling, I did a number of self care plans and collective care plans for myself. It was something that was actually assigned to us
Yeah.
as social workers. You know, we're out there supporting people, so we have to take care of ourselves.
Sure.
And so we had to actually write it out on a piece of paper, you know, write down our actual self care plan and the different ideas of what I can do if I'm feeling, hey, I'm feeling a bit tired today, or even if I'm not feeling that yet, I can look at that piece of paper and it gives me a few ideas of what I can do to
Mhm.
just check in with myself and see how I'm feeling, or give myself a little bit of love, you know. And that's so important when on the days when your brain is so full of everything
Mhm.
else, you just can't even imagine adding another thing to your list and having to think of
Yeah.
that. So if you already have it written out, you don't have to do that thinking. That legwork is already done, you know?
Mhm.
And we also made emergency self care plans for the times when your daily things aren't working. And a lot of the time, the emergency ones included collective care. And
Hmm.
that was reaching out for help, you know, telling someone, hey, like, this is going beyond what I can help, what I can do for myself. I really need that extra support. So that's one tool that you can really use that can help you out on a daily basis.
You know, Saskia, I have to say that I'm actually really happy to hear that those are some of the things that you as a social worker had to train in first, because
Mm,
I think that when people are in the caring profession, all too often, like we see people burn out because they don't do that for themselves, right? They do keep going and going and going and going. And so I'm actually really happy to hear that. And also to, okay, I am going to tap into this more with you and see what we can do for like
yeah.
that even just some of the self-care plans, but I know we're going to go into that a little bit here. I'm going to ask you about some of your practices, but that was such a practical and powerful strategy, right? Just to like write out some of the things that you can do. So I love the idea of having a
Mhm.
plan, especially when you're too overwhelmed to think clearly. And that brings us to step 4, ask for help. If you're in Alberta, look into the client directed home care invoicing program, right? Because it actually can give them flexibility
Mhm.
to help hire somebody their way. And that can mean like paid respite hours, paid respite care through that program that Alberta Health Services offers.
Yeah, and that's just, I mean, that's a great example, and we've seen it. We've really seen how that support can turn someone's life around, can turn a whole family's life around. We've seen it over and over again. You know, once you have some support, you can really give yourself some time to take care of you. And
Mhm.
realize also, it opens up the doors for you to realize how many other options there are out there. Once you're connected to
Mhm.
one thing, a lot of the time you can get referrals through that one support system to other
Oh,
options
yeah.
as well. So it really just opens that doorway. And you know, that kind of brings us to step 5, which is
Yeah.
once you have that space, you have to take that rest time. But you need to reframe the guilt as well, because sometimes people can feel guilty for resting, but it's
Mhm.
not
Absolutely.
about, you know, feeling guilty. It's not a selfish thing. It is survival, and beyond that, it's strength and it's resilience, and it's giving you that ability to show up again over and over again for your loved one, giving yourself that rest. You know, it's all, that whole, you know, you need to put someone else's or put your own mask on the airplane
Yes.
before
Yeah.
you put someone else's on. You know, it's that whole
Yeah.
metaphor. But you really do need to take care of yourself so that you can care for your loved ones.
Absolutely, you do. And, you know, the reframing the guilt piece is so important. Like, I don't know how
Mhm.
many people we hear say, oh my God, I just can't do that. I feel so guilty. But there's so many studies on sleep, even that if you're, you
Yeah.
know, going without sleep, it's not good for a person's well-being, right? Overall well-being. So finally, it brings us to step 6, which is the compassion reset. So the compassion reset checklist says that you name it. What emotions are you carrying today? You breathe. So take 10 minutes to move, to stretch, or like even just sit in silence and refocus. Ask what's mine to carry and what isn't mine to carry, and then replenish. So, doing that one thing for yourself, which is maybe you like to listen to music and you know, take a half an hour and put your headphones in and just listen to your favorite songs. Or you like to step out into nature. Maybe you can do both. You can put your headphones on and step into nature and take a walk. But and then there's prayer if you are so inclined, and there's always movement of your body. And I think sometimes people, you move around all day for helping people, lifting, moving, transferring, doing all those things. But like movement where it's sort of intentional movement is really important too, where they're stretching their arms up and, just stretching, just movement, and reconnection, which is talking to someone who, like you said earlier, Saskia, who really sees you and who witnesses you and who actually really understands the path that you're on. I think that's kind of where we're at with that piece about witnessing and connecting with. You want to connect with the resources, but it's also good to connect with other people who are on the same path and know that you guys can help each other, because everybody's path and journey is different, but somebody always brings something to the table, even just a commonality, right? Of
Mhm.
caregiver too. It's like you don't even, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the shared, common experiences is why the support groups actually are so common and so helpful. People might not want to admit, oh, I'm going to a support group, but that's why people go, is because sometimes you just need to feel like, okay, what I'm feeling right now is normal. I feel like resentment right now, but
Yeah.
it's actually normal. That's something that comes along with these things. And when you have someone else that can share that with you, you don't feel like, oh, this is so I'm so alone in this. You kind of get to feel, okay, this is normal, and maybe there's something that we can do. If we're both feeling this, are other people feeling it? Have other people done things to address it? And that's where this compassion reset cocomes in. And this compassion reset right here can be your self-care plan. If you're feeling overwhelmed about writing out your self-care plan, we will give you these steps, so it's already done for you. You
Yeah,
don't have to think
exactly.
about it. You can engage in these things. And I do want to just quickly touch on two of the parts of that checklist. The last step, where you talk about reconnecting and being seen and being witnessed, it's often what brings people back from the edge, because you really do feel like, okay, I've got that person that's tuned in to what's going on in my life, and they really get
Mhm.
it. And that's collective care. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be we're getting together and doing something. It's just being seen by that person. And I do want to take one moment and just go back to step 2, which is breathe.
Sure.
And if you're listening right now, every time I see that step, I always just immediately take a deep breath myself. So I want all of us to just take that opportunity to breathe in and breathe out. And that's just one part of your self care that's done today. One simple
Beautiful.
breath.
And yeah, it makes such a difference. Closing
Mm-hmm.
your eyes, one deep breath in, one deep breath out makes such a difference for that reset. So thank you for touching base on those last 2 points, like in a bigger way. I think that was actually really important. And I would say to our listeners that you've made it this far in the conversation. And so that tells us like one thing. One thing is that they definitely care and that they are open to caring for themselves. So the next brave thing to do is
Caring for yourself. Yeah. And I'm going to say it again, don't do it alone. You're not in this alone. Invite someone into it, and invite a friend, a neighbor, a sibling. Collective care starts with connection, and caregiving, it's an act of humanity, of deep humanity. And
Mhm.
so that humanity doesn't happen alone. Humans aren't here alone. We're here in community, we're here in a village. And, caregivers are not limitless. Caregivers are not machines. If you're listening and you're a caregiver, you're a person, and you have needs and dreams and breaking points, very natural
Mhm.
breaking points. So recognizing burnout early, investing in resilience, invest and building that circle of support. That's how we ensure that the care doesn't come at the cost of the caregiver and the caregivers, not just physical health, but emotional health and the health of their whole system, their life, their livelihood, all of those aspects of themselves.
Yes, Saskia. And I think it's important to touch back on the being seen and being witnessed. And what I want to say
Mm-hmm.
is to our listeners that if no one has told you lately that you're doing an amazing job, we do want to say
Mm-hmm.
and wholeheartedly that you're doing an amazing job. And not everybody steps into or is able to or willing or, not everybody does that. So it's a special role, it's a special person. You are doing a great job. There are resources out there to help, but family caregiving is actually one of the most compassionate, selfless roles a person can take on. But it does not need to be a solo journey. And burnout is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that something just needs to change. And by understanding the nature of caregiving and the warning signs of burnout, which you've explained and shared, Saskia, we can better support those who give so much of themselves every single day. And I
Mhm.
don't just mean, I mean collectively, right? Like we as a society can support those that we can start to recognize are burning out.
Yeah.
So I would say that I want to thank our listeners for joining in today. Saskia, I really want to thank you for joining in and bringing your wealth of information from your programs. I know that that compassion checklist actually came from one of your programs, so would love to include the link there for our listeners to be able to tap into. And also,
Absolutely.
if this did resonate, oh, sorry, go
Oh,
ahead,
sorry. I
Saskia.
said absolutely.
Oh, you'll include that. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
And I think that we'd love to hear from our listeners. So, if you or someone you care about needs to hear this, please share it. And if you're navigating caregiving, aging, or burnout yourself, visit us, call us, and we're there to chat. So you're never alone. And we can connect you to some community resources as well. And so I think, Saskia, is there anything else that you'd like to share as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much again for having me in this conversation. And yeah, I do agree to anyone listening out there, you're doing an amazing job. And like you said, it's not every person that will take on this role. So just be proud of yourself, be kind to yourself, love yourself a little bit for taking on something that not everyone out there will do. It's a meaningful thing that you're doing, and we want to support you in that. And that's what this is all about. And so hopefully a couple of things that we talked about today helped. And if not, there's many other steps that we'll, continue to share in our work together, and everyone has different solutions that's going to work for them. So just because, maybe taking a deep breath today didn't solve all your problems, that's okay, Maybe it just gave you that moment to think, okay, there's other options out there. There's other steps that I can take that can help me. And
Mhm.
yeah, just keep being open to seeing what can change and how it can shift, and what can improve, because you don't have to give up. It can get better.
Absolutely. And so we just invite you to, until next time, be kind to yourself. Reach out when you need to. And remember that aging is not just a journey, it is an art.